Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something wildly fascinating. Why are we so incredibly good at fixing other people's problems, yet just absolutely terrible at fixing our own? I mean, we've all been there, right? A friend comes to you with a massive relationship crisis or a career dilemma, and suddenly, boom, you're dispensing advice with the clarity of a Zen master. But the very second you face a similar issue in your own life, that clarity completely evaporates. You're left making highly irrational, sometimes flat out ridiculous decisions. So, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how we can actually fix it.
To kick things off, there's this brilliant Persian proverb that hits the nail on the head. It asks, if you know the lullaby, why can't you fall asleep? It perfectly captures the mystery we're looking at today. How is it possible that you can hold the exact knowledge required to solve a problem, you know the lullaby, yet you remain completely unable to apply it to yourself to find peace? Why does our profound wisdom just vanish into thin air when we face a personal crisis? Well, it turns out this isn't just some quirky character flaw. It's actually a hardwired psychological phenomenon.
In fact, psychologists Ethan Kroos and Igor Grossman extensively studied this fundamental disconnect, and they gave this first-person versus third-person asymmetry a name. They call it Solomon's paradox. The core idea is that when you look at the world from a first-person perspective, your judgment and your decision-making skills are vastly different, and honestly much worse, than when you look at that exact same scenario from the perspective of an objective third-person observer. It's an asymmetry in wise reasoning that trips up almost every single one of us.
To really bring this to life, let's look at two historical Solomons who perfectly demonstrate how even the smartest people on earth can succumb to completely irrational behavior in their private lives. First up, the namesake, King Solomon from biblical lore. This was a guy so famously wise that leaders traveled from across the known world just to seek his counsel. Yet, in his personal life, he amassed 700 wives, completely drifted from his core values, and ultimately watched his kingdom fall into ruin. Then, fast forward to a modern example, Judge Solomon Wachtler. He was a highly respected American judge, a champion of women's rights, and someone who made incredibly fair, rational legal decisions from the bench. But in his personal life, when a romantic relationship ended, he literally lost his grip on reality. He engaged in bizarre stalking behavior, even threatening to kidnap his ex-lover's child, and ended up in a federal prison. People literally said he lived a double life. How could a man so wise in the courtroom be so unhinged at home? Well, that is Solomon's paradox in action. Now, let's get into the 4 pillars of wisdom. We're moving into the hard science here to see how researchers actually break down and measure wise reasoning to cure this paradox. Because in modern psychology, wisdom isn't just some mystical, glowing aura. It's a very specific, measurable set of cognitive strategies. What's really fascinating is that these 4 pillars represent true wisdom, which is the exact opposite of the childish, naive realism we default to when we get personally triggered. You know how it goes. When we're drowning in our own problems, we tend to think we know all the facts, and the other person is just entirely wrong. But true wisdom requires 4 things. Number 1, intellectual humility. That's just admitting you don't know everything and your initial gut reaction might be wrong. Number 2, compromise and concession. Realizing you aren't always going to get 100% of what you want. Number 3, accepting uncertainty and change. Understanding the world is chaotic and this current crisis might actually lead to future growth. And number 4, perspective taking. The actual ability to step into the other person's shoes and understand why they're doing what they're doing. To test this, researchers used something called the event reconstruction method. Basically, they forced people to analyze intense social conflicts from different vantage points. Imagine a scenario where a close business partner suddenly steals all your money and skips town. Obviously, a massive, highly complex conflict. Researchers asked one group to imagine this happening to them directly. Then they asked another group to imagine it happening to a completely random third party, like a friend or a stranger. Finally, they evaluated how everyone responded using those 4 pillars of wisdom we just broke down. And the data proves the asymmetry absolutely perfectly. It shows that simply shifting your perspective to a third-person observer dramatically spikes your wisdom score. When participants were immersed in the conflict, looking at it through that first-person lens, their wise reasoning scores completely tanked. They wanted immediate revenge, they had zero intellectual humility, and compromise was totally off the table. But when the exact same people viewed the situation from a distance, as if it were happening to somebody else, their scores shot right up. Suddenly, they were exhibiting high levels of perspective taking. They were looking at the bigger picture. It's like flipping a switch in the brain. So that brings us to the illusion of age.
Get ready for a massive paradigm shift here because we are about to completely dismantle one of the biggest cultural myths we have about who is actually wise. We have all been conditioned to believe that wisdom just magically accumulates as your hair turns gray, right? Well, the research tells a totally different story.
When controlling for perspective, it turns out a 20-year-old is actually just as capable of profound wisdom as an 80-year-old. When researchers compared the 20 to 40 age bracket against the 60 to 80 age bracket using that same event reconstruction method, the results were practically identical. When forced into a first-person perspective, both the younger and older adults showed terrible low wisdom. But when shifted to a third-person perspective, both groups showed incredibly high wisdom. There was virtually zero difference between the generations.
So the crucial takeaway here is that wisdom is not embedded in your DNA, and it's not tied to your age. It is a highly situational state of mind that you can actively trigger. We used to treat wisdom like an IQ score. You either have it or you don't, and hopefully you get more as you get older. But the new reality is that wisdom depends entirely on your environment and your perspective in any given moment. You could literally be the wisest person in the room at work, and then be a complete irrational fool at home an hour later. It fluctuates entirely based on how close you are to the problem.
Which leads us to our final section, the power of emo-diversity. Let's shatter one last myth, the completely false idea that to be truly wise, you have to suppress all your emotions and act like a cold, calculating robot. We hear this advice all the time. Don't be emotional, just be logical. It assumes feelings are the enemy of wisdom. But the science shows that's a total misunderstanding of how the human brain actually processes complexity. Science shows it's actually not about turning off your feelings at all. It's about cultivating emo-diversity. This is a term researchers use to describe experiencing a rich, varied ecosystem of distinct emotions simultaneously, rather than just one single overwhelming feeling. Think about it. When a crisis hits, someone lacking emo-diversity might just feel blinding rage. It's just a barren emotional landscape. But someone with high emo-diversity, they'll feel anger, sure, but they'll also feel sadness, surprise, disappointment, maybe even a little bit of guilt. Their emotional response is incredibly nuanced and detailed.
I absolutely love this metaphor. Feeling anger, sadness, surprise, and guilt all at the exact same time protects your logic so much better than just pure blinding rage. Think of a biological ecosystem, like a jungle. If that environment only has one type of animal and a disease hits, the entire ecosystem collapses, right? But in a highly diverse jungle, if one species struggles, the system naturally balances itself out and survives. Well, your mind works the exact same way. If you only feel one massive emotion, like anger, your logical reasoning just completely collapses. But if you have emo-diversity, those varied feelings balance each other out, allowing you to actually maintain your wisdom and make smart decisions, even when you're super stressed.
So how do we get there? The ultimate hack to achieve this diverse emotional state is something called self-distancing. It literally means advising yourself using your own name to step out of that first-person trap. Researchers found this is the most effective way to trigger emo-diversity and beat Solomon's paradox. Instead of sitting there thinking, why am I so upset about this? What should I do? You use your own name. Why is John so upset about this? What should John do? Actually, by simply changing the pronouns in your own head, you instantly create psychological distance. You step right into the shoes of the third-person observer. Your emo-diversity unlocks, and your wise reasoning score absolutely skyrockets.
We'll wrap up this explainer by throwing a challenge your way. The next time life gets tough, change your perspective. Be your own third-person observer. The science of Solomon's paradox proves you already possess all the wisdom you need to navigate your biggest challenges. You literally just have to access it the right way. So stop trying to solve your problems from the inside out. Step back, use your own name, look at the situation as if you were advising a dear friend, and just watch how quickly the right answers present themselves. It's a total game changer. Until next time, keep stepping back and keep learning.